Well, thank you for joining us today for the Creative Conference, and welcome to this conversation of sound and film for film and television. I am Michael P. Clark. I'm a production sound mixer in Atlanta, and I work mainly in episodic TV shows, notably The Walking Dead and Stranger Things. We are together with two very well-respected, talented, and award-winning production sound mixers. Together, we are going to talk about our work in sound and how we approach sound with hopes to allow better understanding of our craft, how we can all work together on and be a major contribution to the final product. Please welcome Mary Ellis and Felipe Borrero. How are you guys today? And by the way, it is very happy to see your faces, like the entire face. How are you guys doing today?
Yes, I'm doing fine.
Very good.
Ladies first, I'm so sorry.
That's all right. No, we're doing excellent. It's nice to have kind of sort of a 3-day weekend. We did most of the night Thursday night, and it was freezing.
Oh, you were outside in that mess.
Yeah.
That cold coming back to us and hitting us again.
I was on stage.
Lucky for you. I was on stage on Thursday as well. Thankfully, we had a nice early day and we were out by 6:30.
Yeah, so was I.
One of those rare, I'm used to when we were on The Walking Dead, anytime we had a 3-day weekend, somehow we always ended up on an overnight going into that Friday and kind of took away our real 3-day weekend. But that's filmmaking for us, right?
Yeah.
In case many of you don't know, Mary Ellis is Oscar-nominated production sound mixer for her work in First Man and Baby Driver, and an Emmy winner for her movie in Warm Springs. Congratulations to all those accolades. You've worked on some pretty astounding art pieces, as I like to call them, throughout your entire career.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate.
Felipe Borrero, a Emmy-winning sound mixer for his work in The Rat Pack, and multiple nominations for his work on Ozark, which he's currently working on. Welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Let's see. One of those things is, we're just going to kind of chat about sound, how we approach sound and what we love about sound. I find whenever people talk about, hey, so what is your job really about? A lot of people always assume, especially since I've worked on Walking Dead, I'm like creating zombie noises and head crashes and all that stuff. And not a lot of people quite understand that our main job is capturing the performance of actors and the dialogue, not just dialogue, but efforts and emotions that really enhance the image. And the success of us is really based on being unnoticed in that final product. We know how people sound through communications, and we try to capture those same experiences in that fake world without even being noticed. And when it is noticed, unintelligible or distracting, it pulls the audience away from the beautiful image that 98% of the rest of the crew is trying to capture and create. Many obstacles in our way, and I like to kind of approach sound from the very, very, very beginning of pre-production and, trying to understand the script and what the potential view and look that the director is coming up with. And we get that script breakdown. How do you guys do you also approach it in the same way? Is script is kind of where we get it first. That's our first kind of look at it, aside from the interviews and whatnot. I've never really had the opportunity of getting a script before the interview and saying, I don't really want to do this job, or I do. Have you had that luxury of being able to read a script before accepting a job?
I almost always get to. They send me an NDA, I sign it and scan it back. And it's just so helpful if you have that opportunity, because you can break things down. I know we talked about before about breaking down Baby Driver, which ended up being like 15 pages for me to take to my interview with Edgar Wright, only because everything was in sync to the 22 songs in the movie. So we had to figure out how to get, gun blasts, flashes in sync, walking, money being counted on the table, all of that stuff. So it was very unusual in that it was probably the most difficult breakdown I've ever done. because each song was like, say, one song would go from scene 1 to 21.
Yeah.
So it was a very difficult breakdown, and I spent days on it. Usually they're a little more straightforward than that. In fact, I had an interview today, Zoom interview with the director. I got the script yesterday, so it was a speed read. Jotted some notes down. It's heavy on music, almost like a battle of the bands thing happens. So, I didn't know how much he knew about doing music properly for a movie. Because for me, something like this is all going to depend on having everything pre-recorded, which involves a really good relationship between him, a music supervisor, and myself, that we're all on the same page, that we have that stuff pre-recorded. Was explaining kind of, there's a big wedding scene. He wants an 8-piece band there. It's like, just let him know that I can wire those 8 people. That's not a problem, but delivering him the music track he wants is not possible on the day. A drum kit needs 3 mics, and, just explaining those things about why these pre-records are so incredibly important by telling him, and the other thing I suggested, which I always suggest if I can get away with it, depending on the production designer, one wedding takes place 30 years later than the first. So I suggested that we use actual practical set deck. So whatever they're seeing for that band at that wedding, and the handheld mic that gets passed between the best man and the maid of honor, and then the dads, that all be a working prop. Because that way it's in the set, you never have to move it. So you're not trying to cheat stuff out of 3 cameras. Oh shoot, we got to move the speakers, we got to move the thumper, that sort of thing. It's just a great way not to burn their daylight or their dark, whatever the case may be. So, I start lobbying hard early on. I'll probably tomorrow put all those bullet points that he and I talked about today into an email. I don't officially have the job, but I'll do my homework on the weekend since I'm working. And then, if they do end up hiring me, I would send that email out in a blast to, the UPM, the producer, him, probably his assistant, just because I think the assistants actually read all the mail first. And, obviously there's not a supervisor hired yet. So he and I talked about the importance of having a great supervisor, not just for, whoever ends up doing production sound, but to make his life easier in post-production.
A lot of well-known current films that use music and use playback have done a lot of live recording for a lot of their shows. Is that a direction you're suggesting? Obviously, since you don't have the job, can't really talk too much about it, but is it one of those, or is it going to be more of a playback situation for the entire part?
I think it needs to be more of a playback situation, because to really do a band right, you need so many tracks, so many sources, and then it's like they do a take they don't like, then you're redoing that, and instead of concentrating on getting your scenes with your actors, you're doing something that you could very easily do in pre-production, very easily replace in post-production. And I suggested to him that we have things available like the practical mic is live, that we're prepared to earwig the band, and also, blast the music for the wedding crowd, the wedding goers, and take it immediately to a thump track and preserve that dialogue, because there's 8 to 10 people speaking in any given scene. So my goal is to always give editorial all those choices, but my number one goal is to capture that production dialogue. Yeah. So that's how I approach it.
Are you gonna it's great having practical mics. So are you gonna try to outfit that microphone at all with a different type of microphone, or are you gonna try to keep it to be a vintage microphone?
Oh, that's the stuff we go back and forth with the designer and the art director. So I'm way too far away.
Sure, of course.
I'm not even hired, but we'll send pictures of what we think. And then this has happened in the past too. I think it was Footloose. And then they say, no, we don't like that look. This is what we've got. And then we work back and forth so that you pick whatever you and the director want. It's a visual medium. You just got to make sure that we can make it work.
Yeah.
Practically.
One of One of the things, Michael, you got to make sure is, because I did a vintage movie when I did the Rat Pack, and they wanted, we talked about this, we recorded at the time, there was an 8-track recording because there was 6 people singing. Some of them wanted to sing and some of them didn't want to sing. So we had to find microphones, period microphones that actually work. And that's the difficult part, not just finding the right look of the microphone, but finding one that works. And I wound up coring out, buying the microphones and coring them out and putting microphones, my own microphones in there, because the ones that were there were not suitable anymore. They just didn't function right. And if I could get 6 mics that looked the same and sounded the same, then I could do that, but I couldn't. They were not available at the time for me to do that. So I had to take them out and put them together and be ready at any moment. He may say, no, I don't want to sing that song, or yes, I want to sing that song. So there was I was sort of playing back and recording at the same time, which made it very difficult. And then the band was pre-recorded with all of the stops, because one of the things that the Rat Pack did was they had the shenanigans where they would stop and, stop that song. No, you can't do that. And Sammy Davis Jr. would do a joke. So all of that was built in. The playback track didn't stop. It played through the whole scene. So if the scene took 6 minutes and a half, the track played for 6 minutes and a half, and I had to interject the real live voices whenever it was not allowed in the track. So it was kind of weird. And I've never had to do that again. That was the only time. And one of the things, like Mary says, you try and get as many people on board before you do that. And I was fortunate enough to have time off and be at the recording and see where the pauses were and where the music would start again and what was supposed to happen. The director was there with me, talking me through it. So I knew what to expect when I did that. But it wasn't, I wasn't a one-man band. It was a low budget HBO show, but I still had to give the quality that they wanted.
Yeah. Did you find, working on that show were all those pauses choreographed, or was there ever moments where the actors got so comfortable with each other where they decided to just kind of ad-lib their own little humorous stuff in there?
Are you referring to me or to
you?
Oh,
yeah, with pauses,
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. But they had to do it within the time limit that they had.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, this was before we went in and shot anything. We actually rehearsed everything.
Okay.
Several times. So it wasn't a spontaneous thing. Even the jokes that they said and how they said it, they could have changed the inflections of it, but it was still the same joke in the same amount of time. We were locked into it. It's the way the director saved a lot of money by not having to use several layers of the sound to work with. We shot it like Phil Spector would have, 8 tracks all at once.
Yeah. That brings in a great concept of making sure that post-production's involved early. Once you do get hired on especially projects that deal with a lot of music. I'm actually we have a lot of post-production elements in the show that we're currently doing, that we're doing some really great things on set for, that I wish I shouldn't even brought up because I can't even really talk about it. But just being able to record things in a way that really help out post-production. Post-production being one of our main clients in my personal perspective, because they listen to all our stuff, they have to deal with all of our stuff, and whether or not they can clean it, whether they see the little tiny things that we nitpick about that most other people on set do not pick up on. I love getting post-production involved early. Current show, I've hit up my dialogue editor immediately, and they were completely surprised that I was even reaching out. They're not even working currently at the show, but I keep dropping them notes on saying, hey, just letting you know what's coming down the pipeline. I've tried, I did everything I can. Good luck. Hopefully, you've had some practice in dealing with some elements. And I can only imagine, Mary, that Baby Driver was such a huge post-production elements, really driven by sound, which what a great project to be involved in. I'm sure any production sound mixer had that come across their desk, they would have done anything and everything to get involved on something like that. That is truly a sound movie.
Yeah.
And, congratulations on all the nominations and
Well deserved
from it. Absolutely. What a pile of stuff to really add in. You had Alex Lowe out there doing Pro Tools breakdowns and everything. I gotta imagine that was such a tedious pre-production process for you. Being a TV guy, pre-production for me is reading a script that just came out the week before that we're trying to shoot next week.
Yeah, that was crazy. Alex, actually, I suggested hiring Alex, and he actually had his own separate interview. I actually asked for our editor to be involved in the second interview I had with Edgar. My first one was he and I alone with my big breakdown with all the songs. The breakdown included the songs, the type of car, how much driving was involved in that particular song. And Alex and I actually built, I should say jerry-rigged a battery-powered thumper that would fit under the seat of a car. So, which we only got to use once. We were so disappointed because we really wanted to use that thing. And Edgar said, y'all don't need that. So, but yeah, and the editor was on the set with us, which is a first and last for me career-wise. And he was a huge help because he is Edgar's editor. So he was in my court and he would help me lobby for things, the right way to do things. And so it was immensely helpful. The thing when I read the script that was the scariest for me was that, I'm suddenly the master clock for like everything in the movie, the dimmer board, the props, the background,
right.
And it's like, wow. I mean, that responsibility before we figured it out kind of scared me to death. Because it's like, everybody's asking me, how are we going to do this? And I'm like going, I've never done this.
Right.
I have no idea how we're going to do this. So it's like, let's think about this. So yeah, that was crucial and it went pretty well. I don't think we had too many hiccups. And the other thing, of course, Edgar always wanted to hear the music in one ear of his context and the production dialogue in the other. So there was a lot of little tweaks that happened along the way once we started shooting.
Did you end up using a stereo transmission for that to work out that way?
No, Alex handled that. Alex was on set every day. That was one of the things when I went in to talk to him. And then when Alex went back to talk to him, we were like, because of schedule changes and cover sets, we can't day play Alex. It was a 16-week movie, and it was, and that met a lot of resistance, I can tell you, with the producers because of the money involved. But
it seemed like every scene had
there was
queuing involved. That makes sense.
There was just no other way to do it. So
one of the things that Alec has, that he's also a musician, and he's worked for me, and where the director says, this song is too long, and Alex said, no problem, and he cut it right in front of him, and we had a new song. I mean, the same song but shorter, without hearing any of the mistakes there. So I mean, I think it's really good that you had him on your team. He's a valid person that you can count on when in situations like that, and it's just such a relief so that you can focus on what your real job is. Getting good, clean dialogue tracks.
Yeah.
I mean, people mixers who try to do the whole thing themselves. I don't understand it. I mean, how can it's just. You can't chew gum and walk in this business. I'm sorry. I mean, a lot of people think they can, but it's really your focus or our focus as mixers is to get good, clean dialogue tracks. Everything else is secondary.
Well, that's one of the things that I brought up today was just like, I'm not a musician. I don't record music. I spent my life doing TV, movies, episodic and movies. And my focus is always, of course, on clean dialogue. And it was like, I could probably give you that 8-piece band, a recording of it, but you probably wouldn't use it in your movie, so, but I told him, I said, I don't know anything about music, which is a terrible thing to say for somebody who's done a lot of music movies, but I'm smart enough to hire somebody who does know everything.
You
there
know
is
how to get it right. And that's what your job is. You're the director. You're orchestrating the sound department to make sure that they get what they need, and it goes through you. So you know who to hire. It's just like a director may not know how to do sound, or he doesn't know how to do a costume or makeup, but he's directing those people. This is what I want it to be. And they tell you, and you make sure that it happens, or we make sure that it happens. I think that's the most important part of it, that we're the head of the department, but we are not the department. We're not the only ones there. There's lots of us that help to make our life easier.
Right. Oh, let me throw in another shout out to Alex, because he was also with me on First Man. And he claims that I gave him the hardest job of his entire career.
For that gig?
Yeah, the capsule work. It was really hard to figure out. The actors couldn't hear each other once they put on the helmets. They couldn't hear the director, the AD. We had 7 off-camera readers doing mission control so that it would all flow in real time, kind of like a documentary style. And he had an incredible setup. Because, sometimes one actor would say to him, well, I only want to hear Neil Armstrong. I don't want to hear the other guy. Yeah. So he was having to finesse and tweak that on the fly daily for 6 weeks.
And being prepared. Being prepared for that scene.
Yeah, he did a flawless job on that capsule work and on all the playback work for that show. So.
And I think it helped a lot, again, because he's a musician, because he's recorded music in a recording session where that kind of torture is put on him, where he has to separate. The drummer only wants to hear the lead, the whoever. He does that all the time. So it's not something that you need to know, because you're not going to do it again, not for the longest time. And it's not what you want to do. I mean, that's not what I would want to do.
Yeah.
The younger kids will say, "Wow, yeah, I want to do that," because no. I mean, 15, 20 years I've been using Pro Tools, and I insist, and no matter how simple it is, if there's a cue in the music, there has to be another person. It's not me. I can't cue the music and then come back and say, oh, what is he saying? No, that's not the way it works.
The lowest I'll go, and I actually have done this week, and I actually I'm doing this on Monday, is I'll cue an effect that is a triggering an emotion from the actor of some sort, or a very simple, just kind of background music. Some of our actors prefer to have music playing instead to react to get an emotional response from. I mean, I'm not a musician, although I grew up around music, all that stuff. I can completely understand that need to kind of let music drive your emotions in a scene. And we do it all the time on Stranger Things. And Post just deals with, they get rid of the music and they come in and they do the emotions. I am like, come on, I want to get that emotion because you're crying, you're emoting feelings as well. But I get the music part. But I'll do that where I'll just play one music just for that, or like a monster scream to kind of get a reaction from an actor. But yeah, some of these.
But it's more of an on-off thing when you do
exactly,
that.
Exactly.
I'm talking about like all of a sudden the music's playing and they're about to talk and you have to turn the music off, and then they stop talking and then you put the music on, so the background. No.
I fell into that trap early on, a show called Single Ladies, where they would have big parties going on and they wanted music playing in the background, and then we would cut the music for the dialogue. It's a steady cam came into that little section, and then I would start it back up again to get the thumper going so that the crowd can go, and they just didn't have the money for it. And I was like, okay, I can do that. I'll get an extra rental.
I did that on a non-union film, and there was 7 rappers and they had to play, and the music comes out and they do their bit, and then the music goes off, and all of a sudden they're looking at me because the music didn't go on, and they said, Flip, where's the music? I said, I ran out of hands.
Right, exactly.
I ran out of hands. I can't do it all, and they said, okay, sorry, we'll do it again, What were they going to do? Fire me? They couldn't afford anybody.
Yeah. Another aspect of, pre-production is, some projects you guys have worked on deal with some pretty difficult wardrobe or costumes. I'm sure Flip can talk about some Spider-Man scenarios, or, being able to get that opportunity as you read the script to go, I've done it before where I've seen costumes literally listed in the line that do not sound very good for us, and just immediately hit up the costumes department and ask them, what are we dealing with and how can we fix it? And I've had some good success as long as we get them early instead of on the day.
You got to create rapport with the costumers. It's really important, especially the on-set ones, even though the designer might say, no, you cannot touch the costume.
Yeah.
The costumer says, we could probably sneak it in over here and no one will know. But you got to work with them because they can either make your job very easy, or you have a looper because the costume is really bad. Right?
I've got a great story about that. I actually went to the hair, makeup, and wardrobe test for prisoners. And of course, they told me when they hired me that the weather was going to be a character. That they wanted snow. Anytime it rained, we were going to jump outside and do a scene in the rain, which, makes wiring even harder. And so I'm at the test and they're trying on the coats because it's cold. We're shooting January, February, March in Atlanta at night. So we went through the whole thing about the coats because, some of them sound like, a sleeping bag. The actor doesn't even have to move and they sound bad. So we knew there was going to be a lot of movement. So I was working with a production designer and Denis, the director, and we 86'd a ton of bad sounding coats and it ended up with a great selection of coats.
That's great.
And then our female lead, on the first day that she's got to wear a coat, decides that her warming coat is warmer than her wardrobe coat, and she's not wearing the wardrobe coat anymore.
Oh no.
She's wearing the Michelin Man sleeping bag.
Oh no.
Coat. And she won't let you tape a microphone to her skin anywhere. So yeah, that was like one of those, you think you've done your homework. Well, guess what? Too bad. It didn't matter.
You did do your homework. Yeah, you did your homework, and then something, a curveball ends up here. But could you imagine not even preparing for that and doing what you did and showing up on the day with probably the outfit they would have just said, this will work.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too, that people that, if you haven't been in this business long, that's where the producers really weigh in. So, every producer has a different slot to fill, in that hierarchy or food chain or whatever you want to call it. But where they're the most involved is the look, which means the makeup look, the hair look, and the costume look. So they're not thinking about us at all. It's all about how this is going to sell, the demographics, how we're going to market this. They're not thinking about how we're going to capture sound. So when they do, the midriff tops and, you see 8 inches of skin below the bra line and, the hips, they don't care. That's the look they want. And it's up to us to figure out how to get around that. And like Flip says, normally the people that save us are the on-set costumers because they, most of the really good ones, and there are some really, really great ones here in Atlanta. We are blessed in that department.
Yes.
Come up with some super creative solutions. Viola Davis ended up wearing the small transmitter with a cut of mics, so there wouldn't be so much cable in there, in her bra. So I mean, but other actors are like, no, I don't want to feel it because if I feel it, it's going to affect my performance.
Yeah.
There's so many things you can prepare for with that, and just still on the day, you're suddenly like, oh no, what are we going to do now? So
that's great. We have one actress in, I don't know if I can talk about this, in Ozark, who used to forget her microphone. She'd go somewhere, take it off, and we never knew where they were. So my boom operator and my utility, Jared and Akira, designed this pack. This was the pack. The microphone was attached right here. And she would take it and shove it into her bra. That was it. Rigging her, it never touched her, anything. And before she walked off the set, he would go like this, and you put the pack on her hand, and she'd walk away. And we called it the Ruth rig. But
Oh, now we know who.
she's gone to other shows since this and said, hey, could you like make me a Ruth rig? And they say, what? No, they don't know what she's talking about.
I love that you have names for your rigs, because I have the same thing. On The Walking Dead, almost every character has their own rig, and it was based on either the way they preferred to be mic'd, or the sweat factor, or weaponry, or what they typically wear. We had a Rick rig, a Daryl rig, a Gabriel rig. We had a Herschel rig, and I could go to my utility and say, and now on any job, and just be like, oh, we should do a Herschel rig on him, or we should do a Rick rig on him. And now he knows exactly what we're talking about, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I've always wondered about the sweat factor on Walking Dead, because I mean, they all must have just been sweating like crazy.
And they enhance it. I mean, they make them sweat. If it's not a sweaty day, they'll spray them down and make them sweaty. So, a lot of stitching. And Bartek kind of started off that with a couple of his characters on season 3 before I showed up, or sorry, season 2 before I showed up mid-season 3. And there was some actors, we would just have them stitched in. Some actors we couldn't do that with. And another sound, Whit Norris in town gave me a great recommendation on trying to use ShamWows, and we kind of started playing around with different ShamWow rigs, where the ShamWow was closest to the skin and the mic head was above the ShamWow and off the skin, and the sweat would just collect on that ShamWow, and we would save mics. I kid you not, Abraham, Michael Cudlett's, we jokingly referred to him as the redheaded sweat child. And because we would have to wire him 3 to 4 times a day, because the microphone would collect so much sweat that it would destroy the mic. His sound would be bad. We'd have to go in there, rewire him. And it was a nonstop over and over again until we got the ShamWow rig going. And it was a one and done thing, and never had to deal with it again, which was great. The only bad part is at the end of the day, you had to squeeze to get it out.
I'm glad I wasn't the utility person. I didn't have to squeeze any of those.
Yeah.
But, we also use it in the rain, because one of the characters that we had was his figure was in the rain every time. So we had to have a lot of dialogue in the rain. And one of the things that compliments I got from the post, which was really nice, is someone that that he knows how hard you work to get it. He says, we used every bit of dialogue you did in the rain. And it had to do with those ShamWow things. We had to wrap the mics around like that. Eventually they would die, but it lasted a lot longer than we would have had without it, just trying to tape it over or put a finger condom on the mic or something. So it was good. It was great. That I got that from Whit also, and it worked for us. Mm-hmm. But we just got a big roll, and we never squeezed any. We just pulled it off and just put a new one on.
Threw it away.
It's gross.
Well, one of my biggest sweat nightmares was We Are Marshall, a football movie that we filmed in Atlanta, June, July, and August.
Oh.
So they were sweating so much that we just went to, the go-to thing was to put the transmitters in upside down, because they would sweat so much it would literally pull into the connections of the transmitters. So it was just, all the transmitters were upside down. We stitched the football players' mics into their pads and created pockets again. But again, there was still so much sweat. We put them in sort of waterproof pockets upside down and cut a hole for the mic and a small hole for the antenna. They were going through micro transmitters like crazy the first week. It's like, whoa, what are we going to do?
And that was just from water damage into the transmitters. Let's say, did they get any impact damages from a football movie? I mean, I know obviously they have great techniques now in NFL. You never hear about it, but
yeah. No, that's why we went into the pad, so that if they got hit, and we foamed that up really well.
Yeah.
So and we literally just we had those pockets stitched in there where they could absolutely go nowhere. So that worked out great, because we could just go ahead and pre-wire a bunch of pads the same sizes. And then whoever was going to speak changed from day to day, from scene to scene, and just made sure they got a wired pad.
Yeah.
Well, made it pretty
The
simple.
NFL had some packs that they made. They were like maybe this size and probably this flat. They were
Wow.
longer than the regular ones. The only problem was that you turned them on and you couldn't turn them off. That was it. They would just die, and you'd have to change the pack in order to get another system in there.
Like
But they were so flat that you wouldn't hurt anybody. Because they were like, but that got to be very expensive, and they stopped doing that. It's like a new pack every time they change the battery.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, when costumes aren't your friend, oddly enough, that next department that I try to make friends with and stay friends with, which I don't always have to ask a lot for, is the hair department. Because when costumes fail and you have no more ways to go, you pray for an actor that has long hair and you can slip that bad boy up in there. And I got to tell you, it's like my favorite place to put a microphone, because I wish I could get every actor to wear a hair mic if
I want to see you
allow you to.
hide that on my head.
Well, obviously, you
Not
gotta,
a candidate.
yeah, not a candidate at all.
No.
No.
I have a funny story about that. I was doing one, it was all hospital gowns,
Oh,
paper hospital gowns.
oof.
No way I could get anything. So I said, let's try this. So we put a B6, the smallest one at the time, into her hair. So I would take a thread and tie it onto a bobby clip, and then threaded the bobby clip in here so the mic would stand out. The first time I did it, I used like a thick thread so that it wouldn't fall out. And then I would cut the thread to put it in there. And the first time, guess what I cut?
You cut
Oh,
the
no.
microphone.
I cut the B6 cable. It was exactly the same.
Yeah, it's a thin cable. It's an honest mistake. I've had that happen. Wardrobe has done that to me.
But it works. I mean, that in the hair thing, if you can't get it anywhere else, it works.
Yeah.
We did Daisy Ridley's wig for C.A.S. walking reshoots, because all the costumes were made out of plastic. I don't know who did the first unit work or the movie work, but I don't know how they could have managed to achieve anything there, because she said it was the first time anybody had ever put a mic in her hair. And she didn't really love it, but I let her listen to what it sounded like on her bra, and then what she sounded like, you know, with it in her hair. And she already had so much ADR work to do, and it was already on another project. She was like, okay, if this is the only way you can do it, you can have it. So it might not be a bad idea sometimes if you're trying to convince an actor, especially one who tells you, I hate to ADR, I don't want to loop anything. And you say, this is my last resort, here's why, please come listen.
Yeah.
You know, it takes 5 minutes, and then suddenly she was sold. You know?
Sold. Yeah. I haven't had to do that with an actor where I even have the opportunity to give him an A and B, which is amazing if you can give that to him. I have had an actor where season 2, I put hair mic all the way because just wasn't, you know, we're dealing with children, Stranger Things, you know, and they don't have the chest that we're used to when we deal with adults, and wardrobes and scratchy all day long, and the hair worked. So I was like, let's just go into your hair and see, and just go with that every day. Didn't care, didn't whine, didn't cry. Came back and saw him again, and it was like, I sounded great. Like he admittedly could tell that he sounded amazing no matter what he did, because you have no head turn concerns with a wire. You have no down, up, whatever. They sound great no matter where they put their body and their body positions into. And, you know, it goes along these lines of, you know, as sound mixers, you know, unfortunately, a lot of low budget filmmaking and whatnot have to hire smaller crews that have smaller gear and smaller capabilities of shooting.
Smaller
and
budgets.
Lower budgets, and they tend to rely on having wires on all their actors, as opposed to going the more avant-garde, like booming, the more classic way of approaching independent filmmaking and films. They want this up in your face kind of sound because they feel like that's the way it should be. And I feel like a lot of that comes from reality television world that they're all used to, coming up in YouTube world, where everything's just right up in your face, and not really, as a director, understanding that, you know, a natural boom sounds more like your ears and not relying on wires for those reasons of head turns, body positions. I often fight for shots on The Walking Dead a lot of times where, because of all their wardrobe, all their gack that they had, weaponry across their chest. Hey, Jean-Pierre. Jean-Philippe. You know, weaponry across their chest, and or just heavy wardrobe that doesn't make their stuff clear, and then they lean over, or they're the whole scene is something. How about this? I'm sure you guys feel the same way. You come into a marketing rehearsal and it's a person sitting on a chair and they got their elbows on their knees and they're the lowest person in the frame. Everybody else is standing, and you know they're going to shoot a wide, and that tight's going to be that guy on that chair leaning over his wire. And you're like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to put this mic to make it sound natural? A lot of times hair is the way to go in that respect. But I am kind of diverting off of where I was going here, but trying to keep it simple for independent filmmaking and allowing yourself to choose shot selections as you shoot your project that account for being able to have a boom over the head and give you that natural, rich sound that we're used to hearing voices in.
Or a microphone that's going to be painted out and you don't have to worry about it being on top of the costumes instead of under the costumes.
If you have that budget.
If you have that budget, or someone who really cares about what you're doing. You know, it's a rarity. You find that the bigger the budget, they just throw money at it. Oh, we'll fix it later. And I said, no, you don't have to fix it later. You just take the time and think about what you're doing. You know, like what Marielle is to go through pre-productions and talk to everybody from the top to the bottom of what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. You can save a lot of money instead of spending it. They think that, you know, if we can fix it later, we'll save the time, but it's not always true. I mean, you can't always fix the performance later.
Yeah. And one of the big ways of, you know, trying to save money on the day is shooting wides and tights. And as a director, if you could pair a static wide shot with your immense tight shot that you see us three on, you don't have to rely on a wire in that situation, which is what most people would have to do. You can drop that boom in and take a plate, allow visual effects. That's the cheapest way of getting rid of something in your scene. If anybody's ever, have you guys worked with that before? I know we have.
Yeah, we do. And Ozark, it's what saved my butt many times. It's sort of like, well, one of the DP of
House of Cards.
Alec, yeah, of House of Cards. When we first said, let's try this, because we were talking about it in the community, in the Atlanta community, the sound community, about doing plates. I think it was Alan who started it. And I said, we should try that. And then we happened to have the director who started it in House of Cards. And he said, sure, yeah, go right ahead. And we looked at each other, oh, okay. So now we got to think about what's the limitations to us. I mean, and technically there is no limitations. You can just paint out, even in the moving shot, you can do it. But to make it easy so that the editor can do it anywhere. I mean, if I have this hand up and they don't want it here, they'll just make a plate of nothing there and then take the hand out. Because what you'll see is the picture, as long as the frame around that person is not moving, you can do that. And you can do it in editing. You don't even have to go to post effects thing. Anybody could do it. I can do it before I even give it to them on a computer. So it's a great saver. Not having to mix the scene, especially when it's a wide shot that you know they're not going to use, but you can't say anything.
You can't say it.
It's a dialogue scene, and you're going to go to the medium and close-ups. And you know, we're not selling real estate; we're selling the dialogue and the emotions. And
I love that.
There's people who want to. I mean, one of the other things that freaks me out is directors who want the entire scene on a wide shot for us to work on it. Why? You're not going to use it.
Yeah.
I mean, 47 years, I know you're not going to use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had one director who did no close-ups. He only did the wide shots. And what did they do? They cut out the close-ups from the wide shot. You know what that looks like?
Unemployment line? I don't think that guy would be asked back again.
So the director didn't come back the next year.
I can
because
imagine.
he didn't get any closer.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite tools to use. And obviously, or just for anybody that doesn't know, you can't use it in film because the film plane moves, and even though it looks still, it's actually moving, and that is not something you can do. But not a lot of filmmakers still shoot in film, so it's probably a moot point. Highest resolution is obviously better than lower, so 4 to 8K works, and you got to get at least a 10-second plate of moving picture, not a static frame.
And the other thing is that if you do it for film, you still have to transfer it to digital to do it, and then transfer it back to film. So it becomes very costly. But we're talking about never leaving the video domain. So it's all digital. You're not losing anything because you never went in another format to have it captured.
I should have mentioned that to Tom Luce when I brought that up on The Walking Dead, and he shot me down within 2 seconds because of the film aspect of it, but not thinking that obviously we do transfer this digital right at Telecity stage, and it could have been done actually. Now that you think about it, I'll send him a memo. How do you think that won't go over too well, will it, Mary? I'm actually talking to him in a couple of weeks. I'll make sure I say hi to you, Tim, for you. Another part of prepping is scouts. I mean, being able to see a location prior to shooting is so big for the sound department, and we've been kind of pushed out in a lot of sense in scouting. It's at least in the TV world. In TV land, I get to go on the very first day of scouting, and that's about it. I love scouts because I get to meet a lot of people that I'm going to be working day in and day out with that I haven't met yet. A lot of times that's the first time meeting them, as well as the director, ADs, and whatnot. And not only do you get to see, depending on what directors you work for, I've worked with a few that I've learned so much about what they want and what they're trying to capture out of those moments than I do on the day when we're shooting the scene. When they go off and go do private rehearsal without the sound crew, which, by the way, we can talk about that in a little bit too, because I have some beefs about private rehearsals and not including us. And I'm starting to come up with a dialogue that I want to start approaching them with, because we need to be in there. And unfortunately, and this is one of those reasons I get to see what the director's really visioning without me having to go ask them later on the day or right before it gets into where it's too much for me or too late for me to really make any major adjustments. But if I know, a lot of times they'll break down, like I can tell that they're only going to need this shot for this part of the script and this shot for that part. I can see their vision as opposed to trying to guess it later. That's what I love about scouts, aside from even being able to just know how to approach a certain location in terms of noisemakers that we can deal with on a scout versus last minute when we finally roll in and we have all these switches we have to switch to get refrigerators or AC units and all this stuff turned off. How has scouting come along with you guys in your career? Has it changed much for you?
Well, for me, I would say that when I did more films, I did more films than TV when I came to Atlanta. In LA, I did movies, and here I did TV. I got stuck in that realm. But in a movie, you were expected to go. It wasn't like, can you go? You were expected to go on a scout and put your 2 cents in and see that. And it was important because sometimes where he thought he's going to put the generator was not a good place for you because he didn't know that there was a scene that was so on and so forth. But also, like you said, when you go into a place and you know where all the switches are, you know who you're going to talk to for the location, and you know where the action's going to be. You're going to find out if you're going to have the traffic's going to be stopped. And in the films, it was easier to get traffic stopped, even when you're not looking at the traffic. You know, it wasn't a visual thing, it was a sound thing. And then all of a sudden it became a visual thing. Oh, we don't see the traffic. Oh yeah, but I still hear it. You know, more so than before. But you come, excuse me, but when you shoot TV, it's a luxury to be able to go. on a scout. And it's even more of a luxury that they would hire someone who is a sound person to go on the scout for you so that he can come back with notes. That doesn't exist. I mean, no one's looking out for you, even though occasionally you find a producer who has you have worked with before and knows that you're going to complain about such things, and he'll look out for you and he says, listen, this location is going to be difficult. It's going to be hard for you in this, and we may need to, you got to go check it out yourself. But most of the time, fix it in the mix. It's sort of, TV is like that. And we have to come up with these gadgets like the swab, like you said, to stop things that we weren't told about. You see it in the script, but it's not always clear that it's going to be rain on top of them instead of rain in front of them,
Well, with movies, I almost always go on the scout. One of the things I fought early in my career was certain producers that will go unnamed. Mike knows exactly who I'm talking about.
Yes.
RW. No, kidding.
They would invite me to the scout, which means there would be 31 people on the bus, and only one of us they didn't want to pay because they kept saying, well, it's to your advantage to go on the scout. And it's like, absolutely not. It's to your advantage for me to be on that scout. So I would suggest that people who are getting started, and especially in a market as busy as Atlanta, busy both air traffic, and sheer number of productions. Once upon a time, I actually got traffic rerouted around the Decatur courthouse. Well, that's not going to happen anymore because there's just too many of us and we're everywhere. And you're lucky to get ITC or intermittent traffic control. I asked for it everywhere. I asked for it in front of the house we were at the last 4 days last week. But this is a great location scouting story. They called me from the house, the Hero House, 3 or 4 weeks ago and said, wow, we're like 3 miles from 285. What do you think? And I said, well, I think if you're calling me, you already know it's a terrible location for sound. So, obviously, and I said, and you probably already signed the location contract. So we're not changing this, right? And they were like, well, no, absolutely. We really can't change. It's 3 houses next to each other. So I was like, well, we'll do the best we can, but let's fix what we can fix. We can fix the traffic because the street we were on was very busy. And 285, by the way, was not 3 miles away. You could see it from the front wall. So, but I still felt like, because we had a lot of motorcycles in that neighborhood, I still feel like me insisting on the ITC in front of the house really helped because it was a super busy cut through road. So you do what you can. You tell them, okay, give me this. Obviously my dailies mix was almost all wires when we were outside, just because you want your dailies mix to sound, especially week 1, as good as possible so that you can go back for week 2 without the people in Paramount in LA going, wow, these dailies sound horrible. So there's that. And the other thing I started doing, and this was another Edgar thing, is Paul, his editor, God bless him, he said Edgar likes messy soundtracks. He wants as many layers of sound as he can possibly use. And he said he spends a lot of time throwing stuff in, pulling stuff out. He wants everything to be intelligible dialogue-wise, but he likes a lot of sounds, a lot of different sounds. So when I scouted for Baby Driver, I took a bag rig with me, and I went and got room tone, like 5 or 6 minutes of room tone away from, because normally we scout together as a group, and then every department breaks off. Grip and Electric go to the DP, they talk about lighting, they talk about generator staging. I listen I listen in on that, to know where that generator is going to go so we can fix it that day. Yeah. Most of the electricians I work with are so good that it's not their stuff that gets in our way. We've got this thing now where we bring in our own heat and air conditioning. And, the best boys will have 2 generators 300 or 400 yards away from me. And then locations will drop a non-blip generator at the back door for the AC system that they don't want to turn on and off. And of course the gaffers and I have been butting our heads saying, this is ridiculous. You guys are so considerate. They get upset about it because, they've got guys, laying, hundreds of feet of cable through the woods and poison ivy and all that stuff to make it work for sound. And then locations comes in and just boom, here's your AC generator for the house, and there's worms in every window. And so we can be our own worst enemy in that. And I try to address all of that on Scout. We did a lot of virtual scouting on the job I'm on now, which was interesting. And I've only done it once. I don't want to say I don't like it yet, but I didn't feel like it was as efficient. I always try to find out when we're scouting, whose location is this? Who's going to be here on the day? And I tell them, especially in a restaurant situation, you need to find and identify every breaker and mark it. When we walk in, we need to know we can turn this cooler off. And having said that, we need to remind them, get all your perishable stuff that belongs to this restaurant in that cooler in the back that we're never going to hear. Don't put it in the coolers that we're going to photograph. We can dress those ourselves. Electric can put lights in them, and we don't have to hear those compressors.
Yeah.
So that's really important. And like I said, Edgar really, really appreciated all of those tracks because he likes trains, and he wanted to hear the chirping of the signal crossings at Atlanta red lights. And taking that thing with me, that's something you're not going to get on the day. It just doesn't happen. I asked for 3 minutes of room tone, and they looked like I had 3 heads.
Oh, that's like gone out the window nowadays.
Thursday night, what I did, we have an exterior scene in that terrible location. So we put a second boom. We're at one house like here. We put the second boom at the middle house, facing the same direction, same distance to that 285, but far enough away where we didn't hear crew, we didn't hear dialogue. Mm-hmm. And so every time we roll, you've got a tone track that matches your take. We did that, and we're getting close to wrap. We had tons of stuff out. So, we gave them about 3 minutes of that. So I wrapped that microphone probably 2 or 3 takes before we wrapped for the night, just to give my utility a heads up on catching those actors and getting those wires back and 17 Comtex we had out. And so
that's great. Yeah, we did the same thing. I did the same thing on The Dead. I get asked that often about the cicadas and the insects and all the noises that are kind of like this story point, in my opinion, of The Dead. Right. It really sells the character of the South, which they're in a different area now, but I actually don't mind them. They're there, and there is nothing I can do about it, Yes. And the only way I could get around it was doing what you do. I send a plant mic out there anytime I have that heavy ambience that I just want to get on its own. Hopefully somebody doesn't go off, smoke a cigarette next to it, and start talking about something else that ends up in the track. But you get
that's why you ISO that.
What's that?
That's why you ISO that track.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a huge help. I mean, I'm sure you do it because you've had post also tell you how great that soundtrack really helps out in the mix.
Well, I have a great story about that. I think I told you about this last week, but I was doing Prisoners, and we had tree frogs, and most of the show was at night. So the frogs sounded very different at 8:00 than they did at midnight or 2 a.m. or just before sunrise. So we put the frog mic out, as we called it. And Denis, the director, was really worried about it because he was like, this is supposed to be Maine. And I said, well, don't worry. These frogs are indigenous to Maine, too. Not a problem. And he said, oh, God, that's such a relief. And I said, I just made that up. I have no idea whether they have frogs in Maine. But it turned out that the composer he hired heard those tracks and used the frog tracks in one of the songs that he created for the movie. So the frogs got their 15 minutes of fame.
That's great.
Yes.
You should get points for that. You should get, a credit liner note of some sort.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
In our show, we sometimes have to do like 4 or 5 takes of the same thing. And while we're doing it, a plane will go by. Mm-hmm. Just enough to annoy me, but no one else. And one of the things I found that the music composer of the show will include that sound into the music. It sort of like comes up with the music and it goes down. So it becomes part of that eerie sound that something bad is going to happen or whatever.
That's cool.
It was like very creative of use. I said, wow, I remember that was like an awful, I thought we weren't going to use that. And they used it.
Yeah. Well, the things that make me crazy, trains, planes, cicadas, crickets, frogs, none of that makes me crazy. What makes me crazy is recording crew chatter, our own traffic, Those two things I just go absolutely apeshit over.
Man,
I'm usually try to be pretty mellow,
Yeah.
nowhere near the set, but even if I'm consistently recording crew that will not shut up for the 2 minutes and 8 seconds it takes to roll, I really go nuts. So, and another thing too, I should mention is that I have had super great luck with the greens department. I think with costumes, you got props helping you. Greens is your next best bet a lot of times. For instance, one day at the house last week, the only place to be, because the real estate was rocky and hilly between the 3 yards, and they did a big wide crane shot that hinged through all 3 properties. So the only place to be was behind camera, which was miles and miles away, or hiding in plain sight. So we went into the middle bedroom of the house next door, and the only window we could drop cables out was the bathroom window, which was clearly in the shot. So the greens department and I had talked about it on Monday. And so he had trees there, like trees on the Christmas tree stands, evergreen trees. So he just stuck a tree in front of the window. So electric cabled in the power to myself and video. We cabled out all of our antenna cables and absolutely disappeared. And I would also suggest that if you're using long distance antennas, because usually I'm hiding all the time now, and the only thing out in the real world is my antennas. It's super smart to buy yourself a camo net, that you have your own camo net that's not 20 by 20. You can keep on your follow card and just drape that sucker over there and then stick it behind a bush that either exists or one that greens you.
It's a good idea.
We routinely, we just do it. I showed the operator where the antennas were, and he was like, well, that's not going to be an issue day, but if they light up that area at night. And I said, well, we'll just camo it for you. And they're so grateful. And that's another thing I want to say before I forget. If you're planting mics anywhere, or your antennas or car mics, show your operators. It's just common courtesy. You need to show your operators where you're putting that stuff. I know they get a lot of money, but they've got a lot of pressure, especially in episodic, where things move fast, things change. Oh, slide over there 2 feet on the slider. It's a different shot for them from take 1 to take 4.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a common courtesy, if you're planning something, putting antennas in plain sight, which I do a lot, I always show the operators, or Tori, my boom operator, always shows the operators. It's just a courtesy that you should do all the time.
And another department that can either make it miserable for you or help you a lot in getting what you want. I mean, I've talked to guys that said, can you just go up a little so we can tip down and I won't see my boom and you still have your shot? Yeah, I mean, some do and some, no, it's art. No, it's not, it's TV.
Yeah. So, yeah, I know what you're saying. We had that artistic approach on The Dead where they always wanted to look down, to look up, to give their characters this sense of being the leaders, being that paramount kind of crew. Going back to your discussion of like not wanting to record the crew, who seems to be, we go out of our way to get this turned off, that turned off, this turned off, and then our own crew bones us. When Atlanta started picking up, there wasn't enough proper studios to record, and still kind of aren't. A lot of people are still shooting in warehouses. We have one set that's still a warehouse, and they're echo chambers. And what most people don't understand is that we have very sensitive microphones that we use that we gain up to dig dialogue out. And that's why we get everything else off, so that we're not bringing that noise floor up. And then some little shift in someone's weight off in the corner that they think they're 50 feet away from set will never hear. But as soon as they shift, it's, you hear it throughout the entire space. We had a show called Single Ladies that was in this all really hard surface, concrete floor, all glass windows from pretty much the entire set, and in a warehouse, and we're start rolling, and all I hear is nachos being chewed by the entire crew because craft service decided to serve nachos on that stage. And man, I was so upset. I was like, I can't believe that is the one thing that I'm hearing out of all this is everyone going And I was like, never, ever serve nachos again, please.
How about people opening up coolers while you're rolling and then letting the cover go?
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy because one of my favorite sayings when we're in places like that, because I spent the first decade and a half of my career filming in warehouses on train tracks. You know, there weren't stages here. There was screen gyms. And the last time I did screen gyms, it was raining outside. We were shooting interiors, but the entire crew was wearing rain gear because the roof leaked that bad before the renovation. So, you know, I've always grown up in these warehouses on train tracks, and it just, like I said, it makes me nuts. And one of my favorite things when I finally lose my temper and go nuts is, guess what, folks? 30 people walking around sounds just like 30 fucking people walking around. Of course, if I get to that point, my crew's usually going, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, all these little extra noises that we have to deal with on set, not just crew members, but you know, the broadband noises that are just in our world. You know, technology has really improved a lot as we've been in this industry. You guys have been in it way longer than I have, and you've dealt with Nagras. I'm sure you guys have worked. Did both of you end up starting your career working with Nagras and tape-based machines and very few tracks to deal with and not being able to isolate? What's that?
You were 1000, my first machine.
There you go.
Wasn't even a Nagra.
Oh,
Nagra was a piece of cake once you used that little.
My first movie, Fried Green Tomato, major movie, I should say, I'd done a lot of TV before that, was with a 1-track mono machine. And then in 95, I got the stereo 2-track Nagra. And then we went through that phase of those horrible DAT machines that are good for doorstops, because they were never, ever designed to work in the real world with real heat, real cold. That's when we started backing stuff up. You know, I never backed anything up until we got to that world, because they were so unreliable. You had to back up. You had to have a backup, you know? So I certainly don't miss that phase. And I went kicking and screaming into it. And I still think that the analog sound is so much richer and warmer. You know, having done so many movies with that sound, you know, it's still kind of a hard transition for me, because I just still don't think digital has the depth and the warmth.
The beginning and the end of the notes are cut off. I mean, it's sort of like listening to a recording of a jazz recording at the Village Gate on an LP, as opposed to listening to it on a CD. One is crispy and the other one sounds like life. And you know, you hear the room was part of the experience of listening to the music is where you were. And for me, it was always important to try to balance where I was and listen to the sound, which they don't do anymore. Everything is digital. Well, they just make everything sound flat. Because I remember I used to record Latin bands. It's 18, 20 piece band, and we recorded, and it'd sound incredible. Then I'd hear the stuff that comes from Japanese imitating the Latin music. And the problem was at the beginning and the end of the note, you couldn't hear how the crescendo was gone. It was just flat. And bam, that was it. It was like, so that's what I found the difference, like when pretty much saying the same thing you're saying, that in analog, there was a richness there. There was a presence that doesn't exist anymore, because it's easier for them to erase all of that stuff. In one sense, it's been easier for me in difficult situations where the generator's heard. I mean, we don't turn air conditioners off anymore because they can erase it. You know, as long as the sound is constant, they can erase it.
But let's not make that a habit for future filmmakers to leave the AC on.
No, but it wasn't our choice. It wasn't a choice by us. It was the leading actors who said, let's just establish it on. It's an office. Offices have air conditioners. It's just this discomfort. You know, it had nothing to do with whether it was right or not. But if you listen to the tracks, I mean, the stuff that I've done, I mean, I'm really surprised that they were able to minimalize it to that extent. And the other thing is, there's a lot of music in our stuff. undertones that play, and a lot of it sounds like machinery. So it's sort of like, it's okay, you know, you hear the car going by, but it's also goes into a song, not a song,
Right. Yeah.
but a number that reflects that. So it's kind of going to be interesting once leaving this show that I've been working on for 3 years, and I'm not going to have the kind of post team that I have on here. They're so incredible. And we talk all the time. I mean, this is what's happening. What do you want to do? Well, give me this and give me that. And, you know, we'll do this with it. You know, don't worry about it. But today is sort of like, if you don't have that kind of backup, you're the backup. You got to get it right. Then whoever you hire as a mixer, and as a filmmaker, he's got to understand that he's the first and last of the force right there. He's got to get it right, or she's got to read it. I'm sorry, man. Yeah.
And that really speaks to the idea that us production sound mixers need to act like editors and need to act like sound designers when we record a scene, especially when we have issues like noise on set, and actually recognize that, okay, is this going to kill me? You know, the battles, you know, picking your battles on what needs to be fixed and addressed right now, what we could possibly get away with. I'm running into a lot of all this new technology coming up, not only for sound acquisition, but for camera acquisition, for gear heads, for cranes, the noises that they exhibit in the middle of shots, and Steadicam operators, and the herd of elephants that have to pull them through a hallway to accomplish our ER look. All these little things have driven, become sound design elements, hopefully, or not. And you have to kind of look, okay, we need to really address this. I need you to take off the workout pants that the Steadicam operator is wearing, or the hard sole shoes that the AC is wearing, or ask them if they can roll their feet on the sides of their feet, or go toe to heel, toe to heel. You know, it's like, I find myself trying to dance with it. It's like, hey, you can't, you know, can we try this? Can we try that? And then you get into post and you see it and you're like, wow, they got rid of it. Post-production's tools have also accelerated with the issues that we come up with to be able to get rid of a lot of the stuff that, I mean, at one point we would just pull all our hair out for.
Yeah, they can do half frame slices without thinking about it. And they do it all the time.
Yeah.
Have either of you guys worked with an Oculus head that wasn't hardwired? Because I have never been able to successfully, when they do that wireless blast, and it's nowhere near us, if we get any kind of sheps near it, it just scrambles it. I mean, it changes the sine wave somehow. But when we ask them to hardwire it, and normally most of the tech crews will do it, if you give them enough warning, and, as soon as they land on the set, and I know I've got an Oculus head on the call sheet, either Tori, my boom operator, or myself go talk to them about getting it hardwired. Once it's hardwired, you just hear the usual whoosh, whoosh, of all of that arm going in and out. But
I've only worked with the Oculus a couple times. This is spinning. Is it a spinning
the
camera?
NASA's technology.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for some reason, it seemed like it came up every day. But again, that's another great example of cooperation. There's a different crew with every crane that you get. You might get the same crane, but you're going to get a different crew, two-man crew. Yeah. And so I try to, like I said, the minute they land, one of us goes over there, introduces ourselves, tell them that we've had horrible luck with their wireless system working, and almost all of them have cable to hardwire because that's their backup. So if they tell you that they don't have the capability to hardwire the crane, my response is, well, what would you do if your wireless failed? And then they go, oh yeah, we can probably do that.
Yeah. We're the wireless managers. I mean, we're the ones. I have a license to operate my wireless. I'm sure you guys do as well. And we have more wireless out there than everybody else. And there's this push that we are the wireless managers. And if you're going to want to bring wireless onto the set, we all have to be able to talk together so that we don't inhibit each other. And having that conversation is definitely key nowadays, with especially a lot of things falling into the 2.4 or 5 gigahertz range, where I personally have equipment that operates in that range. I don't know. I don't really feel like you guys have any of those control systems into your setups at all. But they were becoming a problem after a while, you know, and now I have a system that can kind of outblast and outpower them. So I no longer have any of those issues, but you'd run into brick walls. No, we can't fix this. This is how we work all the time. Or how about well, we were here last time and it worked fine.
Yeah, I love that. I try to explain to people that wireless is like religion. You know, some people believe in God, but you can't see him. And sometimes he works for you and sometimes he doesn't. So you got to hope the wireless gods are with you on any given day. And it doesn't matter if it's 2 Mondays in a row in the same location. It could be a different case scenario for sure.
I also found that once I've switched all my wires to digital, I've actually increased my problems with getting outside signals, and I've had to use better filters on my antennas in order to avoid that. And I don't know if you've seen my test that I did with the new professional wireless system.
I was going to ask you what systems you were running and what you were kind of running
I'm using
into.
a Betzel slate with the built-in, but it's too wide bandwidth. And professional wireless makes one that's less. It's like 470 to 619. And so we put it on. I mean, and we went to the same locations we've been to. And I said, Akira, you know, we're testing these out and we haven't got to give him a report. And he says, you know, quite frankly, we haven't had any problems since we put them on. And a lot of people thinking, well, if the Betzel already has one built in, why are you putting another one in there? And it's a good question, but I'm telling you, with half a dB loss in signal, it has more than made up with the losing all of the extra sounds and channels that I was getting. I don't get them anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I get an occasional hit from within my same channels that I'm using, but I'm not getting the outside stuff anymore. And for me, that's a testimony of its own.
Are you using Electrosonics digital right now?
Yes. I'm using the D squares. I have 4, 8, 12 unit.
Yeah. That was a huge learning curve on my part jumping into the digital world as well, was the RF management. And we have been doing analog for so long that how we approach analog RF is completely different in the digital world. And, you know, the manufacturer I use is Axcom. They've been around for 20 years and people were running into this for the last 20 years. Every time they would play around with the gear, they would have disappointments in range and those types of scenarios. And I as well got into it, started using the systems. And what I was doing was fishing or looping through all my wireless for the digital through my analog systems. And it was creating more harm than good, and separating them out and running 2 separate antenna systems until I went completely digital solved everything. And lower, if I have any help in hints in this, but less is more in the digital world in terms of reception. So lower amplitude, lower outputs, you get better range and more reliable system, and having that filter, whereas Axcom has Axcom has a 35 megahertz window that floats depending on where you want it within your spectrum, but it brick walls everything out of it. And that is the key to the success of picking up digital wireless. I'm glad you're also witnessing the same, results.
I find that that's very true. And one of the things is that they think, well, I'm not getting the range, or I'm getting interference, so I'm going to increase the power into the antenna. And that's a mistake, because the antenna is closer to what you want, and you're overshooting your scene and you're getting stuff that you don't want to hear. So turn it down. I mean, I've run those antennas sometimes at -3, -4, as opposed to I've seen people recording at +11. It's just, no, you're just adding more noise than what you want. I mean, move the antenna closer and stop.
I used to push
do it 2 miles away. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I used to run 100-foot
I still
BNC to my antennas, powered them, amped them up for all my electrodes, and I would always push them away from my cart. Now on the digital world, I keep everything on my cart. I have a 60-foot cable that's unpowered and unamplified, and I never even remove it from the cart, barely ever. I'm actually thinking about getting a smaller 25-foot cable just to cut down any cable loss I might be getting with what I have.
Well, that's pretty much what I have. I have, I think, 15 feet on my cart because my pole only goes 9 feet and the other feet goes into the transmitters. And then one 100-footer that I send out all the time. Just keep them separate so they can be, you know, they don't have to be aligned together in the same direction because that doesn't always work for you. And it seems to be, has solved a lot of problems. And the thing is, the closer you get to the set, I mean, if you're 50 feet from the set, you don't need to be amplifying your antenna.
No,
You're just
no.
creating more problems. You're bouncing off of the crane or the frame that they're using to bounce light into. All those things become a problem. The other thing I found that we use all because of COVID, video assist is all wireless now, and everybody's using an iPad. But their antennas, if they put their antenna in front of my antennas, I get problems. If I take my antenna and put it in front of theirs, they don't see the difference, but I can hear the difference. I gain another 20-25% of my distance.
Oh, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Mary, you're still in the digital hybrid world, I guess, with your
Yeah.
electros. Yeah. Have you given any thought of diving into the digital world with our RF spectrum just getting smaller and smaller and smaller?
No, I hope to be retired before it becomes.
There you go.
And I will be joining you.
There you go. Well,
I figure for what that costs, I can live for a year in retirement pretty well because I'm
Yeah.
going to get everything in
Yeah.
my universe paid for, including my home. So,
Exactly.
you know, and of course with COVID, I didn't.
$75,000.
Yeah. How much?
You don't need to pay another $75,000 to correct that stuff. That's a down payment on a ranch.
Yeah, exactly. So, but no, it's weird because I mean, I didn't work for exactly a calendar year with COVID. So I kind of thought I might be taking an early retirement. We got shut down on March 12th on red notice. And my first prep day on this show was March 12th of this year. So, and I, you know, honestly, I really miss the people. I really miss the checks. But a lot about the process these days, I don't miss because, you know, like we were talking about before, when you're on a mono machine, your director has to shoot smartly. You know, you get your wide shot, you do it once, and then you move on, you know, you know, my first big movie with 2 cameras was with John Frankenheimer, Andersonville, Civil War movie, Civil War prison. We didn't have one single interior. But he knew how to use 2 cameras in a way that did not compromise sound. His A camera would have 3 actors in the matte box, you know, and this stuff in the background, but you could boom it all. I had 2 booms on all that stuff. I mean, we did wire people just because of the scope of things. And it was the first time I remember using more than 4 radios. I think I got another quad box. I had 8 radios, and that was huge because this was in 96, 95, 96, I think. So it was a big deal to be running 8 wires back then, you know. And again, I'm pretty sure we were on the 2-track, you know, Nagra. So
had to nail that mix.
Everything he did, he thought about us and doing, you know what I mean? And it was like, and it really worked. He was terrifying to work with because he loved to just rip people to shreds, but he was a great director. And it worked out great. I mean, I got an Emmy nomination out of it, which I was really proud of because it was the hardest thing I'd done to date there for sure. So it went into that absolutely terrified. But
I mean, how many times we've shot 10 takes with a wide shot, you know, also covering a mid, and, you know, on The Walking Dead, we were 3 cameras a lot, and sometimes you would get that wide, mid, and tight, but I would thankfully, after a while of complaining enough, they would start matching headrooms, you know, and that's a key phrase that we like to use a lot of times is match your headrooms and we can make it nice and even.
Match it up here.
Yeah, because when you go in there and you're like, hey, can we not do this wide and tight? And you're like, but I need it wide. I'm going to shoot it wide, this, whatever. And I just not wide this way, go wide all the, you want to go wide this way, go all day long, but high. Yeah. It's just give me a matching headroom and I can make your sound flow consistently from shot to shot, a lot easier than dealing with, squeezing that in there on somebody and then shooting it 10 times with your big master wide shot. And
well, I hate to ask directors for anything. We try never to ask. I had somebody booming for me once, and the actress turns her head like this, and she said, "Oh, can we ask the director to have her not do that?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. That's the way he's blocked it, and that's the way we're going to record it." And I was like, "Oh my God, this person's not going to last very long," and they did. But we never asked for those kind of considerations. But I did when I was doing episodic. Once they got the wide shot, I would go up and say, once you've got 3 of these that you truly love, can we, kill this camera and let me get in there? And when you put it to them like that and you make them start thinking about you and what they're doing to their soundtrack, they're usually okay with it. So I would suggest to people out there that are doing stuff with lower budgets and that's happening to you, be proactive and go up to your director and DP and say, get yourself 3 of these you adore. Let's not do the other 7.
Yeah. And I'll even I do this all the time, not all the time, but I will I'm not afraid to approach a director and ask them about, these pairings and why we're shooting them together. It's like, what's your motivation? What are you looking for here? What are you looking for here? And this is the spot that I'm a little bit worried about. Just the other day, I could see them setting up during our rehearsal, a shot to me that was going to bone me.
Yeah.
Excuse me, for one particular word, and it was not word, but line at the very end of the scene. And it just, this comes into trying to act like an editor and understanding how they might cut this all together. It's like this, I can see. So I got my actor deep in the background over here on a bench. He's got high headroom. You got your main actor up front, normal headroom. Or I'm sorry, but it was the other way around. The guy in the back had the top of the headroom, and our actor in the ground was on the ground, but had a lot of headroom. But his dialogue wasn't to the camera on his left. It was more to the actor and straight ahead. And then that last line leans over and literally rolls towards the camera that he would be smack, in front and not being able to really grab and saying, this is my one moment. Do you have intentions on covering this in another way? And they say, oh yeah, totally. And then, or they cut it for me and allowed me to dip in for that one take they give us, which I go, I hope it's the one you want. Negotiating and just talking about shots. And I like to always bring up that, headrooms really are our safety net in terms of making things consistent.
And that's the other thing we should be teaching the guys and women that we're bringing up, because at one point, I can't remember, not Jared, who's utility with me now, but somebody who was fairly green that was working with me. There was some issue with one of the lines or a couple of lines, and they were like, aren't you going to say anything? And I was like, no, because they're never going to be on that shot for that.
Exactly.
And it's like, we know that because we've been doing it for decades, but that, again, I think it's important that if anybody gets a takeaway from here, start thinking like an editor, because, don't go bother your director for something that that's not going to be where he's going to be. So don't go ask for another one if you don't need it. You'll be much more, effective and efficient about getting what you ask for if you don't ask for everything.
Choose your battles.
Yeah, pick your battles.
Pick your battles. Rather choose your battle. Pick your battles.
Well, guys, I think we kind of ran through a nice breakdown.
One
You have some more to
thing.
say? Go ahead, jump in there.
We got to talk about that effing private rehearsal. I've got a great story on this one, because first of all, we've decided that all 3 of us are going to be noticed. So our MO now is Troy, because Troy has to be in the room booming things. He'll be able to tell me, Mary, we can use rugs. No, we can't. Which is lovely, because we already had rugs down for Steadicam shot in the gravel the other night, and because we work with Matt, and Tori just said, "What lens are you on?" And Steadicam 35. So we knew exactly where we could begin those rugs, and it was right at the path where it goes from nice, beautiful stone to gravel. And I think our director was really surprised, because he was like, "Why are you putting those down there? You don't know if they're going to be in the shot." And we said, "Well, if they're not in the shot, they're already there. You don't wait on them. And if they are in the shot, it takes 20 seconds to pull them. So, but our MO now is that Troy just crashes the private rehearsal. He gets himself in some dark corner where he's not in the actor or the director's eye line. And he just, we just crash it, and only one of us, and I feel like we have a better clue. And again, if they're putting marks down where we can put rugs down, we'll tell them then and there, we might need you to transfer these marks for us. We'd really like to get rugs down on this horrible sounding wood floor. The great story I have for that is my husband's a dolly grip, and he was on a episodic show. And this makes me furious too. I don't know if y'all experience this, but the ADs actually get you a better lockup for a damn private rehearsal than they do when you're rolling, which makes me crazy for some reason. It's like, if you can try this hard for the private rehearsal, then I shouldn't hear anybody talking. Mike shouldn't be recording nachos. This is how it should be. So anyway, Tom.
Uh-oh. She freeze for you too?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
we can talk bad about her now.
Yeah.
She can't talk bad.
Hopefully she'll come back to us. I do have a story with private rehearsals, and it's something that I think that I want to start pushing towards other production sound mixers to start negotiating the ability to be in a private rehearsal. I think this goes along the same realms of like why we're not invited to tech scouts. Like at some point, too many sound mixers kept putting in their 2 cents and being, well, you should really do it like this for us, or do it like that for us as well, and not being a team player. And so there's been this like I think stigma that we're more of troublemakers than anything. And I want to start talking to our ADs and just say, I just want to be a fly in the wall. I'm never going to say anything to you. This just helps me get a better understanding of how you are approaching this scene. We had an emotional scene that we had to shoot just last week. And the main actor and the other actor, they went off and they took probably 15 minutes to do their private rehearsal. And then guess what they called right after that private rehearsal? Second team. Nobody got to see this emotional scene that they're preparing us to not be coming in and making adjustments. I mean, I kid you not, they talked to us the day before, they talked to us the morning of, the importance of being on point and making sure you got all your ducks in a row, because once they're in it, we're not interrupting, we're not going to do second looks, final touches, all that kind of stuff after take one. Just let them go. We'll be in this together and blah, blah, blah. Then they don't even show us the rehearsal. And so as a sound, we're like, what happened? And I literally sat at the edge and I went, huh? And the AD comes in and goes, well, this character sits here. He leans over at one point, then he leans back for the rest of this shot. The other character's over here, just right there. That's it. That's all we got. So wire them up, put a boom in there. It's a tight situation. Couldn't really put 2 booms in there yet. So the first take goes off. We're like, okay, we got it decently, for our rehearsal. And then second take comes around. The actor leans completely forward on his elbows on his knees, face straight down on a wide shot that pushes in to a super tight shot at the end of his emotional 2-page dialogue scene. Half of it ended up with his face down. Next, and all of his breath work went straight into his microphone, as you can imagine, was very plosive heavy. And I'm like pulling my hair out, going, oh my God, this is horrible. I can't even go in there and fix his wire. I can't do any of this. So pulled in a second boom, stuck it underneath the actor. So we had an under and an over for take 3. Take 3 comes around, actor lifts his head up the entire time and he doesn't do his downward dialogue at all. Leans back, does it all. Okay, take 4 comes around and maybe he noticed that we put a mic underneath there and he goes back to digging everything down, and we finally got it all perfect, as good as we could on take 4. We got 4 takes out of it, no rehearsal, all because we couldn't see a private rehearsal. If I saw a private rehearsal, I would have been more prepared and had everything lined up from take 1 to take 4.
I would say if you have like a qualified boom operator, mine's been around for 15 years, working 3 with me. And because of, they may say we can't have a lot of people there. Well, at least they have him in there, you know. And I will campaign that to have him in there. He'll be in the corner, like you said, and do that. But the thing is, you got to also discover who is the culprit who's having this private rehearsal. Is it the first AD or the director who wants the private rehearsal? And why? I mean, I did a movie called The Duff, and it was like we could not, the same thing that you said, could not get into the private rehearsal. And then we go into shooting. You know, they stood over there, they stood there, and that was it. And I went to the director, because the first AD was the old school. You want something on a set, you go to me. You don't talk to the director. I went and talked to the director directly. I said, is there any reason why the boom operator cannot be in your private rehearsal? I said, no. I said, he said, does it help you? He said, yeah, we wouldn't have to wait on us. And I said, did that right in front of the AD. He gave me the look, but we got in. I mean, and it made the difference between getting good sound and not.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, again, what battle are you willing to take? Is it worth it? I mean, is this how passionate about you getting the right product for the movie or not? You know, you got to decide.
Yeah. I think it's definitely a discussion.
And as a filmmaker, if this is going to filmmakers, it's really, they got to think about that sound is just as important as their image. That if they don't treat us with the same respect that they treat the image, they only have half the film, you know? I remember Heart of the Calm. It was hard to watch because the soundtrack was awful. You couldn't hear half of what they were saying.
Well, I have a theory about that. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
My theory is that people only notice sound when it's bad.
Yep.
Yes.
You know, honestly, nobody goes, oh my God, that was a great sounding movie. But I went to see the movie Iris in theater, and it was so bad, I had to leave. I couldn't take it. And my friend Blassingame loves to say, well, you never see anybody coming out of the theater humming the F-stops. So
whistling a two-shot. I said that one the other day on set, and oh, did they get some good laughs.
Yeah.
No one leaves the theater whistling a two-shot. I'm sorry, but you know, we're part of this. And you know, it kind of goes back to what I said in the beginning. We go, good sound is unnoticed. We try to pull our stuff off without being noticed, because sound is such a second nature to everybody that once you notice it, man, it just yanks you right out. And great examples of that. Yeah, anything we can pull out of this is just start including sound in the earlier processes, as well as the actual creative process of shooting. And that private rehearsal should involve us. And hopefully we can start creating a movement to where at least our boom operators are in there to give us that idea.
I'm sorry. And to say to the filmmakers, the more you let us know, the better we'll be for you.
Yeah.
You know, we're only as good as you let us be.
Mm-hmm.
And my code word for the editorial, when they know we haven't gotten a rehearsal, if they go straight from private rehearsal to shooting, I always slated this is take one, formerly known as the rehearsal. So that way they know that we're just winging it on that take one, and we'll try to fix it later. But you know, you're talking about communicating in editorial. I did one pre-shoot day, week before last, 4 days last week. And I think I've talked to our first assistant editor literally every day. So, and it's early days. We're getting to know each other, trying to figure out what his needs are. I did, you know, when we do wires in the cars, I usually also plant mics, and just letting him know the way that I name those tracks. I named it, you know, Tessa and Shannon, and then driver and passenger, so that they're not confused as to what's the two DPAs, what are the two cause 11s. So it's all of that kind of communication that really makes a difference, especially when you've got Photo Kim processing your dailies and your editorial department is at Paramount in Los Angeles. There's a lot that can get lost in translation there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you guys so much. I feel like we really did a top to bottom kind of presentation here about sound and how we would love to be a part of the process to help filmmakers create their sonic landscapes, you know, based around the work that we do from the beginning. Thank you all for joining us, and hope you have a great rest of the night. Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
you too. Y'all happy Easter, everybody. Y'all
You
take care.
too. God
Can't wait to
bless.
see you in person. Fingers crossed. Hi.